So here we've got a nice side bending movement for you. I would say you're aiming for the crease, the side crease of your knee, so midway through the knee, and that would be a nice range or lengthening through the low back muscle, the quadratus lumborum. So that's where you're likely to feel this stretch, is through that low back. So keep your tummy tight here. Try and keep your pelvis slightly tucked under, just so that you're not arching through the low back. And keeping that core tight will really help this movement and keep you nice and stable through that low back. So by doing this movement, you're actually going to help all of the other spinal movements, so your flexion, your rotation, your extension. So often I find in physio, this is a really nice place to start with low back movements. And it's a nice easy one for you to do, standing next to your desk, at home, in the park, wherever you are. You can add in some overhead movements. This will give you more of a stretch through the lats as well. So again, just increasing the difficulty of that stretch. Really make sure your core is pulled in tightly here, so those tummy muscles are nice and strong, and keep breathing. Now, if you're not sure about your posture, go and stand yourself against a wall, as this will give you some extra feedback to how you're standing. So feet nicely up against the wall, and then do exactly the same movements, keeping those shoulder blades against the wall and tummy tucked in, and making sure you don't have a big arch in that low back. So here we've got an exercise that we like to call cat-cow, which is a yoga term for this movement. So here you can see the wrists should be under the shoulder, the knee should be under the hip and the shoulders should be at a similar or same level. Keeping your chin tucked in so that you've got a nice straight line from the neck down to the coccyx, so down to that tailbone. So what we're going to do here is try and isolate the lumbar, so do some lumbar spine movements, some pelvic movements, and then do some thoracic movements, so the upper back. It's really good to be able to move these parts of the spine differently. So here you're going to arch the back, so you're going to stick out your tailbone, and then you're going to round off that lower back and tuck under the tailbone. So when you tuck under, you're also going to be using the tummy muscles just to pull you into that movement. But here you're trying to keep your upper back still, and try and keep those elbows relatively straight as well. So don't keep them locked, keep them soft, but don't bend them too much. So you're tucking the tailbone out, so sticking that bottom out, and then you're tucking under and drawing it in. So this will be some flexion and extension movements. Then you're going to try and keep the lumbar spine still, and you're going to be doing the same movement in the upper back. So to keep the lumbar spine still, keep that core, that tummy muscles nice and tight. So you're going to round off the upper back, tuck that head under, try and keep the arms straight, and then you're going to push down between the shoulder blades to try and get some extension. Again, keep that neck nice and long. So now just practice your body awareness by isolating the upper from the low back. So here we've got a nice stretch for the hip and low back. So I often reference this as the C stretch, so C position. So you want to keep your body up as tall as you can and just take the hip towards the wall. And I'm just pointing there to where I can feel it. Generally, I find that people can feel this in the upper hip area, so that TFL, ITB area. You also may feel a stretch into the low back. So you are supporting yourself with your elbow against the wall at shoulder level, and the hip and the feet are relatively far away from the wall, just to enable you to get that hip down towards the wall. But you can stand closer to the wall if you want to. Again, really try and make sure that you're keeping yourself up tall and that you're not bending forwards or not bending backwards with the spine. So keep that tummy tight. So here we've got a modified Cobra stretch or mobility exercise for you. So you want to just prop yourself up onto your elbows. So if you need support for your elbows, then you can pop a small towel under each arm. But here the main thing is to keep your hips on the floor. So don't lift your hips off the floor. Lift your chest off the floor, keep breathing, and keep your neck nice and long. So don't look too far up. Just look up to the wall in front of you when you prop up onto the elbows. And then you can stay here. So following on from the last exercise, what we're doing here is just making it a little bit more advanced. So you can continue just with the modified Cobra as it is. If you feel that you need a bit more of a challenge, then what we're going to do is add in some rotations. So we really like this exercise. It's really good for disc health, especially if you have a sedentary job. So if you're sitting a lot of the day, it's really good just to open up the spine in this controlled way. So keeping those hips firmly on the floor. You can see here I'm just looking round to the side, and that's going to open up the joints on the opposite side of the back. So you might find that you're tighter on one side. Now this should be tolerable. If it's not tolerable, then again just try and see if you can make the movement even smaller. But if this is something that you're not happy with, then just keep it as the modified Cobra that we showed you in the previous video. So just gently coming up and down. I do like this side to side rotational element to it though, again because I can just feel it really working into that low back. Keep it slow, keep it controlled, breathe through the exercises. And again, do just what is comfortable for you. If you find it is too tight on one side, you can always just do the opposite side for the time being and then come back to that slightly more sore side in a week or so. I'm lifting up the leg here. Again, this is just increasing that mobility into the back. Have a play with it, but again, do what's right for you, and it might be something you can come back to after a few weeks of practice. Okay, so we've got a mobility exercise for the upper back. So you want to lay on one side with the top leg bent, and it's always got to stay on the floor for this exercise. Keep the bottom leg slightly bent but relatively straight. So I'm just pointing there, that knee has got to stay down. So we're rotating, so we're taking that top arm towards the floor on the other side. Now what you want to make sure here is that you don't just drop the shoulder back. You need to keep the shoulder the shoulder blade pulled back and down here, so you've got control around the shoulder. So it's the shoulder blade that you're trying to get on the floor rather than just dropping the shoulder itself down to the floor. So as you can see here, you can just hover above the floor if you need to, unless you've got that upper back mobility that will take you all the way down to the floor. So you're actually moving from the ribs here. So that's where you should feel most of the effort coming from, as I'm just pointing out there for you. So keep the tummy tight and try and turn from the ribs, and follow with your head as well. There will be elements of strengthening to this mobility exercise, so you might find it is quite effortful. So keep breathing, take your time, and just focus on the quality of the movement. So make sure the head is fully supported. If you need to, you can have a small cushion behind the head. Also make sure that knee stays on the floor like we said, but if you can't get into that position, then again you can use your books or your yoga block just under the knee. And of course you want to repeat on both sides.